Hi there again, everybody. Boyd here with you, and welcome to part one of my RMS Lusitania build. This is the 1/350 scale kit originally put out by ANMARK in the 1970s, and this is a repop of the kit from ANMARK that was put out in the mid-80s. This kit's been repopped several times. I think Revell had it for a little while, and now it's the last version I've seen of it put out was by Mr. Hobby in Japan. The kit's getting really hard to find. It's a really nice, highly detailed kit of the Lusitania. It's about 27 inches long, and the original kit here comes with this kind of nice simulated wood base and everything. The newer Mr. Hobby kit comes with a different type of a kind of a black plastic looking base, and a lot of the people that are seeking this model would prefer the older version that we have here. I had to battle several times on eBay auctions over the last year or so to finally get one of these, and really happy that I finally got it. I've been having a lot of fun building the ship models lately. I had so much fun working on the Titanic diorama that I decided to go ahead and build this one next. So here we are, and this is where I'm what I've got done so far. I decided I was going back and forth quite a bit on whether to light it or not, because being that it's a vintage kit and they don't typically fit as well as some of the newer kits and all that, and plus, if I screwed anything up, I was really worried about, being able to replace it. But I decided to go for broke and decided to light this one. And I've been having pretty good success with it so far. Hopefully it'll all work out. You have to kind of plan that with one of these ship models, because there's multi-levels of decks that have to be lit and everything. We have to worry about light leaks and all that. But things are working out pretty good so far, so I wanted to get you guys caught up on what I've been working on. I started off with just the hull here. The hull comes in two halves. You have to put it together and then do all the paint work and puttying on it and everything. And it all fits together pretty good. There was a little bit of warps here and there on it due to it being a vintage kit. It's probably been sitting in a box for, over 25 years. But a little bit of the work with the heat gun straightened everything right out. And I was really happy to get it all, worked out and looking straight. And then it was on to drilling out the hundreds of portholes that you see on the sides of the hull here. This particular kit does not come with the portholes opened up, so I went in with the pin vise, a handheld device that you can turn really slow. A lot of people use a Dremel tool for this, but I'll use the pin vise because I like to turn it really slow and I can control it and everything. And I got my holes all drilled out nice and even, and they, I didn't get any of them too big or anything like that, because sometimes when you use a Dremel and you're spinning it too fast, it'll actually melt the plastic rather than drill into it, and it'll make the hole actually bigger than what you want it to be. But we went through and did the hundreds of those on both sides. That took a couple of days of work. And then you can see up in here, I came back after that and put in all these little pieces of fiber optic. This is a 1mm fiber optic, which was turned out to be the right size. It fit exactly into the the size of the portholes. And you can see there's several hundred of them in there. Now there's different ways you can use fiber optic. You can use these in long strands and connect them to what they call an emitter, a single LED that'll light up all of the strands. But another way that you can do that is just put, like I did here, I put a couple of long lengths of LED tape down inside the hull there on each side, one facing the other, and then you can just clip off these little short lengths of fiber optic here and just push them in the holes, and they'll pick up the light source, and it worked out really well. I used some canopy glue and just kind of had a little puddle, sitting on a piece of cardboard down here, and as I cut each piece of fiber optic, I would dip the tip of that in there and just push it in the hole, so that would secure it in place. They fit pretty tight, but I was worried about them falling out later on or something like that, so a little bit of glue holds those in place. And then of course the canopy glue dries clear later on, so it doesn't block any of the light coming through the LED or anything like that, or through the fiber optics, I'm sorry. And so that worked out really good. So after a couple hundred of those on each side, we were looking pretty good on the hull. Now I'll light it up here for you in a second, but I wanted to explain what I had to work out here as far as the getting power to the model and everything. On the base, I was thinking about a couple different options. You can see that I've got my power supply, which is a 9-volt power supply, plugged in, and it's coming into the back of the base here with a little jack that I just drilled a hole and mounted that. And it was, a matter of mounting a switch and all that stuff. And I originally was going to take these two posts here that you see coming up off of the base, and I was going to put a male jack on one side, you know, connected to power, and a female receiving type jack in the bottom of the hull here, so that the model would basically sit down on there and plug into that, and it would provide power to everything internally inside the model, and you wouldn't have the model permanently attached to the base. You could still pick it up and everything. Well, then I went back and I thought about how I did the Galileo shuttlecraft a while ago, where I had the contact points where you could, you know, not have any wires, and it was sitting on the base and everything. So I did the same thing on this. What I came up with is I've got two pieces of photo etch, old photo etch scraps, you know, brass pieces there, and I basically soldered a wire to the back side of those, one positive and one negative, brought them down through the posts, and I'll show you what we've got on the bottom side of the base here. Don't have this plaque glued down, so we want to drop that, but you can see they just basically come out here and connect to the power jack, and by doing it like that, I eliminated the need for having a power switch, because basically what this will do is when I set it down on here and it makes contact, you'll see that it lights up and everything works, you know, like it's supposed to. We get all our power coming in, and I don't have the need for a switch, because this will be sitting in my display room plugged in, and when I turn, you know, the power on in the room, all my models come on at the same time. I've got them on a kind of a remote control outlet, and I've got it, you know, piggy-tailed off to several other power strips, and all the models are plugged into the same source. And so when I hit that one switch, everything in the room comes on at the same time, basically. So this is what this model would do. Now, if I want to have it displayed without the lights on, you just simply shift it forward a little bit on the base, and when it loses contact down there on the bottom where the brass strips are located, and you know, it's lights out. So we don't have the need for a switch there or anything, you know, more done to the base. I wanted to keep the base looking really clean and simple, so that worked out really good. So now we have the ability to pick up the model and show it, and you know, move it around and do all that stuff. And then when we're done, we can set it back on the base, and whenever we want the power to come back on, we just get it located on top of these contact points, and like I said, everything comes back on. So that's kind of how that worked out. I'm really happy with that. It's a little trick that you guys might want to try if you want to build, you know, some kind of a model and you don't want to have wires coming out of it, which is always kind of unsightly. And then it locks the model down in place too, so you can never move it. So this is kind of a neat little option. But moving on here a little bit, what I've also been working on is the decks. Now I've test fitted the decks up on the top of the ship here. You kind of have to spread it apart a little bit to get that laid down on there. I'm not going to be able to do that with just one hand here, but you can see that you have to paint all the detail on these with a brush, you know, basically by hand, and it's a little bit tedious and it takes a little bit of time, but if you build some of these ship models, you're totally used to that. You get some really good brushes, and you just take your time. Whenever you make a mistake, you just you know, like say if you make a mistake here on the brown, you go over a little bit, you just come back with some of this deck color and just, you know, let it dry, and then paint back over that. And you might have to do that a couple of times, and you'll finally get it looking pretty clean. Here's the main kind of upper boat deck, and you can see the detail I've been painting onto that. We've got the 4 stacks that go on these little black pad areas here, but a lot of neat little details. Now there's a bunch of smaller little parts that'll get glued down onto the deck as well. You know, all the lifeboats and the binnacles, and you know, all the smaller little detail parts that'll go on there. Now this kit came with holes already drilled in the decks here for rigging. You know, they give you some old-fashioned nylon thread, you know, black, that kind of thick black thread, and I knew right away I wasn't going to use that, so I went in and filled in all those holes and painted over them. And I'll be just using, you know, a little bit of CA glue and some of my Easy Line to do all the rigging on this when I get to that, so we'll worry about that later. But what I'm thinking about now is that you can see we've got to get light up to the upper decks here. So these little areas here where you can see that are kind of boxed in, they can be opened up in the center, and that's what I'm going to wind up doing here with my Dremel tool. I'm going to come back and open all these up and right up to the edges there, and then we'll let the light from the LED strips down below kind of leak up into this area up in here, and that's going to give us the lighting for all these cabins and everything that we build. You know, you start gluing down the walls and all that, then you put the roofs on and you build it up one layer at a time. So that's how we're going to get the light to the upper part of the model. Up here forward at the bridge, there's I'm not done detail painting. This is kind of rough yet, but I'm going to clean that all up. But There's a little bulkhead that goes on here that's got like 5 or 6 little round window ports in it. So for that, I'm just going to take some fiber optic again and push that in, and I'll drill a couple holes right here. And as the bulkhead sits on the front, the fiber optic will make a curve, and then I'll push it down in below, and it'll pick up the light again from down below and light up the forward part of the lower half of the bridge there. And anywhere else we need to do it, like on the sides here, we'll have the little navigation lights. You know, a red one on this side and a green on the other, and that'll be the same thing, a piece of fiber optic, you know, extended through here, curving down to get the light source from down below. Now, I'm really happily surprised is that I thought when I put the deck on that I was going to have a bunch of light leaks, you know, all the way around the edges here, but when I get it down, fit in there pretty tight, and I kind of squeeze it together with my hand, I can see that it's going to work out pretty good. The light leaks are going to be pretty minimal. There's just a few tiny little gaps here and there, and we'll go in there with a little bit of our plastic putty, the white putty type stuff that comes in a tube, and we'll use a really small applicator tip, and we'll squeeze a little bit of putty in there and let it dry, and then we can paint over it. I really like using that stuff for fixing light leaks because it's water soluble, and you know, if you get a little bit of too much or whatever, you can just take a Q-tip with some water and just wipe it right off and clean it up, and it'll just stay, you know, in the gaps themselves, and it'll dry nice and hard. Then we can come over and paint that, whether, you know, depending on what area it's overlapping on. If it's overlapping a little bit on the black, we'll paint that black, or if it's a little bit of the white or the decking or whatever. But you know, that's kind of how you work that out, and you're going to be doing a lot of that on these ships if you're going to light them, because they're just, you know, these old kits especially were never meant to be lit. But you can see what I've done here on the upper decks is I've already opened up. There's going to be some skylights here on the top. We have these little sections right here. These were molded completely solid, so I took my Dremel and opened all those up. And so again, when we get light coming through with these areas here opened up, light will, you know, pass through that and go all the way up here to the top. It'll get a little bit dimmer as it gets to the top of the ship, but that's actually what we want. We don't want the side, or, you know, the top to be way brighter than the lower half of the model, so it'll all balance itself out in the end. I learned this by doing a Titanic, 350 scale Titanic that I did several years ago, and then of course the recent one I did in much smaller scale at 700 scale. It all kind of worked out really good. But so there you have it, guys. That's just a quick little update this time. I'm going to be going back and doing quite a bit more work. Like I said, opening up the decks and getting everything ready to go as we build it up deck by deck. Once I get all this opened up here, I'll be able to glue this part down onto the model and make sure I get all my light leaks fixed, and then start putting on all the small details. I want to make sure I get all that done and everything's nice and stable, so when I work with this I'm not picking it up and moving it anymore, and we won't risk damaging anything. So there's a lot of really tiny little small detail parts that you want to put on at the very end, because you don't want to be handling the model too much more after that point. So things like the propellers and all those things we'll do at the very end, because if you're moving the model around, all those things always wind up getting knocked off, and this kit's so rare that I won't be able to replace the parts if I lose anything. I'll have to scratch make stuff, so I don't want to do that. But that's how it's looking, everybody. I'll come back with another update, and there'll be a little slideshow at the end of this showing you the kind of some pictures of the step-by-step work I've been doing to this model up to this point so far. And we'll be back again for part 2 here in another couple of days. I'm really enjoying these ship model builds. It's a lot of fun and something different. So we'll see you next time, everybody. Take care and happy modeling.